explore it.
Funny, like 3/4 of them took vacation. Yeah, true.
Got 3/4 of that one.
Yeah, I got 3.
I would not. I'm still in the FED in the area.
You're not buying much?
How you guys doing? What are those?
Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for coming. I'm Kero Associate Vice President of Community Partnership with Adventist Health Bakersfield. We want to welcome you all to the campus of Cal State Bakersfield. This is hopefully going to be a morning of a lot of learning and a lot of collaboration as we kind of learn from the experiences of others in healthcare. But as you all know, there's a lot of folks here from law enforcement, from Hall Ambulance, from government, from a lot of different organizations. And as you know, when it comes to incidents where there are shooters or mass casualty incidents, it's going to require a team of us, multidisciplinary approach for us to be successful in helping our community. I really appreciate everyone coming here this morning. We do have a couple more folks going to be filing in as we come along. There are refreshments on the outside wall. If you saw those coming in, those are ours, so feel free to share on those. There's an overflow room if we have any issues with capacity. We are getting a little bit full here this morning. And if you parked in one of the farther lots as well, I know F and G were supposed to be our designated lots for free parking. I'm told because we do have the police chief sitting right here in the front row. So, and I can't imagine you ticketing the BPD, but you know, this might happen. So he tells me that you guys will not be ticketed if you're parking in one of the other lots this morning. I want to thank you guys all for coming. Before we start, I'd like to bring up Tony Andrews with Adventist Health Bakersfield's pastoral care team to lead us in an opening prayer.
Let us pray. God, we are gathered here today to learn more on how to care for one another in the midst of chaos. As humanity continues to struggle to make sense of senseless acts and to find its answers, we are still left at the end of the day to continue to care for one another. As a community, we are still feeling the effects of the Las Vegas shootings. We continue to hear the stories from friends and family members of those who have lost their lives, from those who have lost their lives in our hospital and other places of caring. It is our hope today as a community we can learn from those who have experienced tragedy firsthand and how we can best be prepared and respond effectively in such crisis if it happens today or if it happens in our community. I do pray in your holy name. Amen.
And now I'd like to bring up our market president and CEO, Charlotte Briggs, with Adventist Health Bakersfield, to kind of explain how we came here today.
So I'm sure like me, on October 2, you woke up, turned on the news to make sure that we got some updates on what had happened the night before. Now, when I heard this, my first thought was, why? Why did this happen? And then my next thought turned to the people who take care of the people who are injured in circumstances like this. as president of Adventist Health Bakersfield, your next thought is that not only did we immediately go into prayer for the victims in Las Vegas, but for our colleagues in the different hospitals. And then we asked ourselves, so what could we do next for the people who were taking care of the people? And so we got our team together, and one of the things we came up was to put a banner together and to let our colleagues know, the hospitals there, that we were thinking of them. And some of the pictures, you'll see pictures from the Heart Hospital also, but you'll see pictures of the banner. And I'd like to read one of our employees said. I know as ED staff, we stand strong when taking care of our patients. I also know we take that burden home in our heart and cry for those we have taken in that have had such tragedy. My prayers are for your hearts to heal. And I think that that's the spirit of not only Kern County, but that's the spirit we feel as we're colleagues given to call for health care. In Las Vegas, they're 280 miles away, and I'm sure some of us have traveled that road many times. But this shooting felt like it was closer to home. I know for many people in Bakersfield were victims of this, as well as people within Adventist Health. We had one of our ED nurses who, when the shooting started, got his family to safety and went back in. We had our security guard who's still recovering from the shooting of that event. But now we're getting closer to that October date where it's the anniversary date. And what a time to be able to look back at that and have some learnings. In recent months, we've had the shooting at the Heart Hospital. And as leaders in healthcare, once again, we reach out to our partners in healthcare. And you can see through the pictures, we took them little smiley cookies, because once again, it's Smith's, right? What's the cookies that we all love, right? It's Smith's cookies. So what's the thing in Bakersfield that will let people know that we're thinking about them? So we brought the cookies over to them. Once again, we wanted to hear what they had, what they experienced, and we learned some things from their experience sitting down with them. And then not less than 2 weeks ago, at Mercy, we had a potential shooter in there. And while it turned out to be a false alarm, it was frightening nonetheless. And as colleagues at healthcare, I know we all said a prayer for you guys at Mercy. And so today, we're here to learn not only from our Heart Hospital colleagues, but our Mercy colleagues in Las Vegas to hear more about what they've learned. And it's because of these incidences we wanted to bring people together. We wanted to bring Kern County together to learn what happened and what we can grow from. Because there's nothing like an incident happening to bring us all together. And as last night we had dinner with Mason, he said it isn't that if it will happen, it's when it will happen. And the thing in Kern County, are we prepared for it? So at Adventist Health Bakersfield, our mission statement is living God's love by inspiring health, wholeness, and hope. And as today, I'd like to focus on the hope part of it. We hope that doesn't happen. We hope that we'll take away valuable lessons. And we hope for peace for the families of the victim. And we hope for those who are still recovering. So we're here today, and we thought it would be fitting to have this discussion on this beautiful campus. After all, we're here to learn, and what a fitting organization to have it on our institution for learning. So Lynette, we'd like to, number one, thank you, Dr. Lizinski, for allowing us to have it on your campus, and we'd like to bring you up to say a few words.
Well, good morning and a very warm welcome. I'm Lynette Zalesny, and I'm the new president here at CSUB. And on behalf of the entire CSU Bakersfield community, it's truly an honor to welcome all of you to our beautiful campus. And it is inspiring to see so many people who are committed to being prepared to handle crisis situations. I want to thank Charlotte Briggs and her team at Adventist Health today for their outstanding leadership and for convening this very timely and relevant symposium. I also want to echo Charlotte's comments about how important it is for our first responders to be as prepared as they possibly can be. We all hope and pray that these terrible situations never happen. But we must train and be prepared so if something does happen, we know how to react. CSU Bakersfield is committed to doing our part to make sure that we are ready to handle emergencies in a way that will keep our students, our campus community, and our surrounding community safe. Just last week, I observed an active shooter training conducted by our University Police Department. I want to thank our chief for organizing that, and was impressed by the professionalism and dedication of our officers. I know we're looking forward to hearing from Mason Van Houweling about the Las Vegas shooting. Thank you, Mason, for being here and honoring us and sharing your expertise and wisdom. The Las Vegas shooting hits very close to home here at CSUB. Melissa Ramirez, a beautiful young woman who graduated from CSU Bakersfield in 2014, was just starting a promising professional career and was one of the victims of this tragedy. It was such a heartbreaking experience for everyone connected to our university. We have Melissa and all of the victims in our hearts today as we again prepare for these emergencies. Again, thank you to all of you for being here today. This is literally life or death work that you are doing. Please know that our entire CSU Bakersfield community honors you and values your efforts and your fine work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Zelezny. As you know, as we mentioned, there was that active shooter report at the campus of Mercy Southwest earlier this month. Jennifer Culbertson is the Chief Nursing Officer at Mercy Southwest, and I believe Mercy Hospitals in general. We wanted to bring her up to kind of lead a discussion of how timely this can be.
Weird that this was already set up and then this happened to us. Really weird. So what I was asked to do is bring forth some of our learnings that we had, because there was definitely some. We had some really great things that happened, but on the hospital side, we definitely had some learnings that really impaired some of our law enforcement and our first responders to be able to get into our hospital and our surrounding buildings. I like to start everything off with like kind of a cookie cutter thing. So I like to do the positive, the negative, and the positive, because I always like to end things on a positive. So anybody who's ever been in any of my leadership trainings or leadership meetings with me, that's how I do it. First, I have to tell you, our Director of Security did an amazing job having my staff prepared for this. He does tabletop discussions twice a year, every 6 months, and he really taught our staff the basics of what it would take to be involved in an active shooter and what you needed to do. So he really taught us that run, that hide, and that fight. But we also had this online amazing education done through Evade, and so our staff really felt like they were prepared if this was to ever happen, and I have to tell you, they really were. The stories that came to me afterwards were, I knew exactly what to do. One of our nurses was in a delivery 20 minutes before this happened. Now, weirdly, in that 3.5 hour span, we did not have one other delivery, and this was like our busiest delivery month, so we were so grateful that there was nobody else who was delivering a baby during this time. But she did everything right. She had still a tech in the room with her, so she told the tech, if this ends up being a real active shooter, what I need for you to do is grab the baby. We're going to go into the bathroom. I'm going to take Mom. Mom had just had an epidural, so she couldn't walk. Dad and I are going to pick up Mom. We're going to lay her into the bathroom, and then we're going to get the bed pushed up against the door. She already had it prepared. Boom, in like 3 seconds, she knew exactly what needed to be done. One of my NICU nurses, because the way that our NICU is set up, which is one of our learnings that we are changing, is we have 2 ORs that are open that come into our neonatal intensive care unit. And it was very frightening for them because they knew that that was an opening for the unit. The front of the unit's locked, the side of the unit's locked, but this is the back side that people can access. And she took a Helmer refrigerator, and if anybody knows what a Helmer is, it weighs a lot. So her and the staff drug this thing across the floor, opened up another closet, and pushed that Helmer up against there, so there would be no way that somebody could access the unit at that point. She tore up our floor, but we don't really care. I mean, everybody was safe. I don't think our engineering guys appreciated it too much, but we're like, hey, she did exactly what everything needed to be done. The rest of my staff did everything correctly. They had locked themselves into rooms, into closets. We had one guy who was locked in the biohazard closet for 3.5 hours, but he was fine. He was very grateful that everything was good. I have to tell you that probably the biggest learnings we got from this was making sure that we debriefed immediately with our staff. So after the all clear was done, the leadership went into the hospital and we talked with every person that we could possibly come in contact with. from our staff to our patients to the family members. The next day, I did a debrief with our senior leadership because I needed to make sure that they were okay, because if they're not okay to take care of their staff or the patients that day either. And after we got our debrief and we had our tears and, you know, everything's okay, we did a debrief on Friday with staff where they were able to come in and share their experiences with us, because they obviously had some experiences, and they gave us a lot of feedback on what went well and what didn't go well. And then the following day, or the following week, this past Wednesday, we did another debrief, because we figured by that time, it's been almost a week, people's emotions start to settle, people's anger starts to kick in, you know, the whole grieving process, and so we did another debrief. Again, great learnings. I have to tell you, as a hospital, and because I know all of our hospitals have amazing social workers and chaplaincy services, you have to tap into those services if anything like this happens. The way that we did it, we kind of did it in tiers. So once the all clear was done, the management and the leadership went in. And then after that, social services came in. Because, of course, people initially are like, we're fine, we're good, we're good. But I knew that wasn't going to be the case. Then social services came in, and of course it wasn't okay. Anybody who's been involved in any kind of tragedy in their life, one of our ED nurses who I had a conversation with said, I'm good, thank you so much. She told her director, I'm fine. Social services comes in, come to find out she had been a victim of some type of a gun violence in the past. Then the tears started, and then the emotion started. And then after that, probably about an hour and a half after social services left, chaplaincy services came in and spent a lot of time with the patients, the families, and most of all our staff, because we have to make sure our staff are okay to take care of the patients for the rest of that shift, plus the shifts that are going to be coming up. That was our worst fear, is that people were going to be scared to come back to work. And we did have that. The next day, I spent because I have 2 campuses, so I spent 3 straight days at my campus, at the Southwest campus, and we actually had an employee that we had to pull off, and we had to send her. She needed some EAP. She needed that employee assistance program. She was not okay. As soon as she had to step into the area where she was locked in for those 3 hours, the tears started. She was just tremoring. And so we knew the right thing to do for her is to get her off of work. Our amazing social services department spent an hour and a half with her, just talking with her, just to find out, what's her history, what was the trigger for this, and then we got her some services. She made it back to work this past week and came and gave me a great big hug, so it was really nice to see her, because you're never quite sure how people are going to respond to situations like this. The communication between my leadership and their staff was so vital. There's some mixed opinions on this, and this is at some point I need to meet with the police department to find out what we do, what we don't do. But we had great communication between my leadership and the staff in the hospital. Of course, we know that phones shouldn't be going off. You're supposed to remain quiet in a situation like this. But we knew exactly where every employee was during this time. We knew exactly where every visitor was, and we knew the status of every single patient. We knew who was the sickest, who wasn't the sickest, who we needed to attend to once we had the all clear. And that was really vital for us, because we needed to know once we got into the hospital where everybody was at and what was going on. But I'm not really sure if that's correct or not. So there's some learnings that possibly could come there. So the bad. So maps. Our poor law enforcement were given probably the worst maps in the world. At some point, they finally just went in and they ripped off one of the, like the directories that you have in the entrance of your hospital. They finally just ripped that off. Because guess where our maps were at? They were in our security office locked in a safe. Well, if you have an active shooter in your hospital, it's kind of difficult to get to those things. So one of the things that we're going to be doing, and this is just, I think, something that the staff and the leadership and myself came up with, is we're going to have a binder for everybody with a map, room by room, of what's in the hospital, because that's what law enforcement needed that night. They did not need a directory of what's the second floor, what's the first floor. That's not what they needed. They needed to know what's this office, what's in here, what's this. The next thing is that the master key to the hospital did not open up every single door in the hospital. And so that does them no good. Absolutely zero good. They have to be able to open up every single door in your hospital. And the people, they're like our bioengineering, they're the only ones that had the key to their office. Same thing with some of our electrical rooms. They were the only ones that had the key to those offices. One of the big things is we have 2 buildings that sit next to Mercy Southwest. They don't belong to us. They look like our hospital, but they don't belong to us. We only have 1 floor in that building. And they could not get into those office buildings. And so they actually told us that night, once all is said and done, the dust settles, you guys have got to get a master key to every single one of those offices, because they were potentially going to break down 30 doors to get into there. Because, you know, if we have an active shooter, we don't know where it's coming from. We don't know where the person went. So that's one of our biggest learnings, is we got to have that. Not all of the areas, and this is for those of you that have hospitals, not all of the areas in our hospital could hear the code black overhead, which is really dangerous. So I had a respiratory therapist who was in there setting up a ventilator, and somebody called her and said, "Where are you at?" And she said, "Well, I'm in the respiratory room." And thank goodness, you know, it wasn't an active shooter, because if somebody hadn't called her, she would have potentially could have walked out and ended up in a really bad situation because she couldn't hear it. Our dietary staff was still working that night, cleaning up from dinner time. They cannot hear the overhead call inside the dietary area. They are so vulnerable right there because it's really a pretty open area. Probably one of our biggest things that we did learn that night as well is that we actually had a breach of 2 doors. Somebody had told the emergency room department that they were okay to treat patients as usual. And so they did. They were treating the patients that were in the lobby and in the back. But what they were also doing is they were still entering orders, which were shooting off to a printer inside our radiology department. And so that printer just kept going off, and it kept going off. And the staff didn't know what to do. They didn't know, should I get up and plug it? What do I, you know? So that was really alarming for them. So that was a learning for us. But one of the emergency room nurses, and I will never fault her for this, she was doing what she thought was in the best interest of the patient, is we had a patient who was doing not so great, who was in radiology during this time, and she felt like she could take it upon herself to breach the emergency department. So she left the emergency department, walked over to the radiology department, breached that department to go get this patient to take it back to the emergency room. And that is not the correct thing to do. Unfortunately, in a situation like this, everybody has to stay put behind your locked doors. We also had 2 staff members, one's a respiratory therapist and one's a neonatal intensive care unit nurse. And when they heard the overhead, they were still inside the family birth center, which is a locked area. And they walked out. And a staff member was in one of the labor delivery rooms and said, "What are you doing? You need to get behind a door." And they were like, "We're fine. I know how to fight somebody with a gun." Really? That was the wrong answer. Wrong answer. Because not only did they breach our family birth center, they potentially could have breached our neonatal intensive care unit, and they could have put themselves at danger. So they did have we had some hard discussions with people that after this all happened, you know, you can't do that. You have to take care of yourself and your fellow employees. And I have to tell you, we've had to take care of our employees on the backside of that because they feel very betrayed by their workers. They feel betrayed that their workers put them in harm's way. But now I'm going to end with the good. I have to tell you that our first responders in this town are top-notch. They are. I don't think, and hopefully nobody ever has to experience what we've experienced on the backside of this, and trying to explain it to people, you really can't put it into words, but they are the most organized, compassionate, hardworking, knowledgeable individuals I have ever come in contact with. They were so professional through this entire thing. They tapped into every single one of my leaders because every one of my leaders has a strength and they know an area of the hospital. But they were the most amazing group. I cannot express my gratitude to all of you guys who are first responders in this room enough. I absolutely, it's weird being on the backside of that. You know, we've had some really weird incidences at the Southwest, like with power failure for 3 days and things like that, where I'm normally the incident commander. And so to not be in charge is really weird. And especially when you're a leader, to not be in charge and to have to release that is really, really weird. But to be able to stand on the backside and watch how it works was absolutely amazing. I knew no matter what happened at the end of this, whether it was a hoax, as we were starting to learn, you know, probably about an hour and a half in, or if it was the real thing, that my hospital and my staff were going to be taken care of because of our first responders in this town. I honestly cannot thank you guys enough. I know that my staff thank all of you so much from the bottom of their heart. And I know the president of our hospital was able to express his gratitude last week in a meeting. So thank you again. Do you guys have questions for me? Yes?
How did you become aware of the situation? Who told us to cold block overhead? How did all that?
Yeah, absolutely. I can go through that. So we have in our hospital, it's called Condition Help, and it's at 7777, and anybody can call that. So if a family member feels like, oh my gosh, my loved one's down, I need help right now, and they don't know to push the code button, or they don't know to yell out the door, they can call that. Our staff can utilize that as well. That's how we call codes as well. So somebody from within the hospital called that 7777 number and said that there was a shooter on the second floor. And on our second floor is our Family Birth Center, our NICU, and one of my med-surg tele units. And then, so that call goes to our PBX operator downstairs, and then she does her part where she announces that there's a code black. And she was so calm. She said it very clear and concise 3 times. Code black, second floor. Very clear. So everybody knew what was happening, and that's how come everybody was able to take such immediate action and get themselves locked behind doors.
You have 24/7 PBX on?
Yes, we do. Any other questions? Oh, I thought I saw a hand. Nope. All right. Well, I'm going to stick around here, so if you guys have any questions for me, because there were lots of learnings that we learned through this whole thing, and we are really grateful that it was a hoax. And if any of you are aware, we're still waiting. We don't know. The investigation's not closed. We have no idea where this call came from. We just know it was from within our hospital, unfortunately. All right, thank you guys.
Jennifer, thank you so much. What I want to do is, I know you guys probably will start having questions as you're kind of sitting here marinating on this. We have question cards. That way we can save them to the end and we can kind of go through them. And that way you don't forget them, right? Because sometimes you're sitting there and you forget your questions. Happens to me all the time. So Jennifer, thank you so much. Mayor Karen Goth joining us here this morning. Thank you so much for joining us, Mayor. Up next, we wanted to talk to Michelle Oxford, the Chief Executive Officer with the Heart Hospital, about their recent experience with the shooter at their facility.
Welcome. My name is Michelle Oxford. I'm the President and CEO of the Bakersfield Heart Hospital, and I'm here to provide you the accounts of the active shooter situation that we experienced December of last year.
We still have employees landline at the hospital advising there's a subject. The subject is still standing at the back door in a stance as if he's ready to shoot. We're being advised that the subject is shooting inside the hospital.
He's running westbound.
Copy, subject running westbound.
All 13 shots fired.
Copy, shots fired.
Located a handgun and a rifle. 13, they need the hospital locked down. Well, we have multiple officers inside.
Copy, multiple officers inside.
Units are clearing the first floor of the hospital now. The second search team is clearing the second floor right now. However, 13, he's in custody.
Copy, no other victims inside the hospital. All units maintain perimeter around the hospital.
So on December 1st, it was a Friday, 4:41 p.m., a security guard and a housekeeper encountered a man in the back of our parking lot. They actually spoke to him. He was acting a little off, and the security guard noticed that there was a barrel of a gun underneath the side of his very large coat, a little too warm dressed for the October or the December evening. The housekeeper came directly up to administration, where she told me what was happening in the parking lot. I called the PBX operator, same process as Mercy, and code silver was called overhead. She called 911, and what we heard was code silver emergency room. The hospital was placed on lockdown, and staff began moving patients, themselves, and anyone from the lobby into secure areas of the hospital. Approximately 7 minutes later, the gunman fired 6 shots through the glass doors into the employee entrance. 911 was called again. We notified them that the shooter was now an active shooter and within our hospital. The gunman walked the hospital hallways for approximately 3 minutes, then came up to administration before exiting the same way that he entered the facility. Next, shots were fired in the parking lot by law enforcement, And then minutes later, BHH staff rushed to the parking lot. So a lot of those people here today, Laura Canana, Holly, Dr. Fossbinder, who were terrified moments before, then became the life-saving people to help put this person in the care that he needed. So now I'm going to share with you some of the lessons learned and some of the security improvements that we've made in the hospital since that time. The first lesson learned is to provide the specific location. So when I called the PBX operator, I told her what was happening, but what she called overhead was Code Silver Emergency Room. The location was very different. So I called back and said, because I didn't want staff to leave. You hope they follow the training, but just in case, they would be leaving through that exit. So I called back and I said, please call Code Silver Employee Parking Lot Entrance. So she called the code a second time. So this created a little confusion. We heard later that people thought maybe there were two shooters on two opposite ends of the hospital. Also, when calling 911, you can see on the map to the your right is the emergency exit, which is where the 911 call was placed, that the shooter was there, when actually he was all the way on the far left. So just being very specific so the first responders know exactly where they need to be. Our first security improvement was the doors in which he entered. There's a lot of videos out there on Google you can find, so you can see that he shot through those windows, and he paced for quite some time. Once he shot through, he crawled under the bottom part, and this is where he both entered and exited our facility. We have replaced those doors with high-grade steel and protected glass. A second security improvement, at the time of the shooting, we had 6 cameras, so the employee parking lot and entrance, the ambulance bay, we had ED registration, ED lobby, our front lobby doors, and our loading dock. We have added 30 additional cameras. Pretty much everything. So every exterior door or exterior location at the parking, all hallways, all elevators, and anywhere that there's a stairwell, now those doors are monitored, and pretty much every nook and cranny, all public entrances. So anytime someone's in the hospital, we'll know exactly what location that they're at. The next lesson learned, which is very important, there was only one camera viewing station, and that was located in the PBX office. So 8 minutes into this incident, both myself and my CNE decided our offices face the front of the hospital, and there were no lights or sirens, and it had been 8 minutes. So we're trying to figure out, and what we knew that nobody else knew is the security guard said, I don't know, he could have a BB gun. So Laura and I thought maybe this person has been taken down by police 6 blocks away. So it's our job as incident commanders to figure out what's happening. So we left our office 8 minutes into the call and came face to face with a man with an assault rifle. So this could have been prevented. What we did a good job is when he did fire the shots through the doors, the PBX operator did call 911, and she notified 911 that he had now fired shots into the hospital, which you guys were here within 2 minutes, I believe. It was crazy. But Laura and I think, would have been more suited if we would have been able to update the code and say it's been updated to an active shooter. And I think everyone would have stayed a little more safe. We were very lucky he didn't pull the trigger. When you have a weapon and someone comes towards you, you actually point it at them, and we were probably 10 feet away from him. So another security improvement with the update of the cameras. All executives and key directors now have internet access to all of the cameras. So that's my workstation, and we can pull up those cameras and zoom on any particular one at any time. So that's a very important feature that we have now in the hospital. Okay, the next security improvement, when Laura and I exited administration, so that's the door to the left, we came right out into the hallway where we saw him, immediately backed back into the offices. It's a little waiting area. At that time, it was myself, Tamisha, and Laura, and we ran directly into the office to the right, slammed the door. There were no locks on the doors. So go back and look at your doors. Most doors you open with a key. And so Laura and I both, tried to lock the door, and there wasn't a lock. So we sat on the floor and barricaded the door with our backs. Laura grabbed the phone and called 911, which was very smart of her because she was able to then let 911 know exactly where he was in the hospital, the front of the hospital. To the right of the lobby concierge desk is administration. So quick thinking on her part. So we were then on the phone. He paced the office for about, felt like 10 minutes, but 5 or 6 seconds, and then he exited back out the way he came, where Laura let him know that they were no longer there. And we were informed by the 911 operator that shots were fired in the parking lot, and they had him in custody. So we've added, it's the same door, but you can see the door to the left is the outside of the door, and we've added the Columbine lock. So now in a situation, you can lock the doors. So go back, look at your doors, kind of think about your situation and see if you can make sure to have a safety mechanism in place. The next thing that we learned, so when you do your active shooter drills, it's a drill. So in a real situation, law enforcement will be there to clear the building. And I think that was probably one of the most terrifying things for a lot of our staff and patients, because we had 100, 200, I'm not sure, 250, they're shaking their heads, officers in the facility, and they go in threes to each room with their rifles to clear the facility. So our training had not had that in the past, so that's something that we had feedback that it was pretty terrifying to see that in the hospital. Next, communication is key. The hospital was now on lockdown for several hours for the investigation. Communication with staff is very important. It was shift change, so it's happened at 5, and then by 7 o'clock, you still were unable to get into the campus of the hospital. So all of our staff were held at a nearby location, a restaurant. We were able to use our platform called Schedule Anywhere to notify them just to stay there, and we would notify them and when it was cleared to come on site. In-house staff are communicated to by our in-house supervisor rounding. And then we've made a security improvement called Fast Command, which is a platform for mass texting communications during emergencies. Also with your incident command, your chain of command. So now Laura and I and our offices were the crime scene, and we were actually taken down to the station for 2 to 3 hours with some of the other key individuals. So you have your who's next in charge, and so Brian Pasqua was the commander of the hospital at that time, because we had Homeland Security, FBI, everyone in the second floor classroom to debrief and to do next steps, so Brian took over that role. So in closing, training work, our staff implemented what they learned in the drills. They made sure that patients, families, and visitors were taken care of, and that's exactly what we trained them to do. Really, that gunman, when he was in the hospital for 3 minutes, besides myself and Laura, didn't interact with anybody else in the hospital. And our community is amazing. So we wanted to appreciate the support we received from law enforcement and how quickly they got to the hospital for us, EMS and our community partners, and especially Adventist Health in Charlotte. Her team came over and just made us feel wonderful by how much they cared about what we were doing. So we want to thank you for that. Our community takes care of each other. Thank you.
So I say in Kern County, we're all brothers and sisters, aren't we? So that's really our responsibility to take care of each other. I think the other piece that, I think it was last week, the presidents of the hospital got together. We get together almost monthly or quarterly on a hospital council. And one of the things I had to tell Bruce Peters was that what he didn't tell was that he did have 3 confirmed deaths. He had one nurse, 1 physician, and I don't know who the other person was. But that's really the rumor mill, right? And so we're all on texting, making sure that each other from the hospitals are okay. We're reaching out to each other. And I think that that's a lesson learned for us in Kern County is how do we together make sure that the rumor mill is under control, right? Because we can feed it or we cannot. And I think that the other thing that Bruce shared with me was the training that the Mercy group had gone through was the same training that Adventist Health had gone through, and I'm sure it's the same training as we've gone through with Heart Hospitals. We share employees, and so that's a critical piece that is important. But I'd like to talk about our next guest. Mason Van Howling, and he has 20 plus years of experience in healthcare and has an array of background as well as in the military. But I think the piece that, as we talked about earlier, was how we reached out at Adventist Health to University Medical Center, and in some way of the heart of the brothers and sisters that were there taking care of people. And Mason called me a couple days later, and this is not something we expected. It was something we just did because it was the banner we felt was the right thing to do. And he reached out a couple days later to say thank you, and then we got talking about lessons learned. And he can talk about this, but really the whole thing was how do you pay it forward, which is what Jen and Michelle's doing today, is paying it forward, the lessons learned. And so that's why we're here today, is as we've reached out and we really talk about how can we become better at Kern County, how can we become a safer community. And so Mason, I'd like to have you come up and share what the University Medical Center went through, and we really do appreciate the time that you're giving us today.
Thanks, Charlotte. Thank you so much. Oh, good.
I think that's actually. Okay, hopefully everything works. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. It is not by accident that I am here, because your community was among the first to reach out to us, and Charlotte and I created a friendship really after the emergency department at Bakersfield Adventist Hospital sent us a note and well wishes and a gift, and that really meant a lot to us. And we reached out very early on and had a lot of discussions, but we appreciate that, and I think we're going to have a long relationship moving forward. So again, please pass on to the team. That meant a lot to us. It's displayed proudly in our hospital by our emergency department. So I'm going to take you through the lessons learned from University Medical Center in Las Vegas on the response to 1 October. Hopefully you'll see things that you can take from this. I'm open to questions, but one of the biggest things for me is, while the worst tragedy happened in Las Vegas, I personally got to see, and hopefully the world got to see, the best come out of our community in Las Vegas. So with that, I'm going to start the presentation here. Just a little bit about University Medical Center. We were founded in 1931. We started out with one doctor, one nurse taking care of the workers of the Boulder Dam at the time. We've since have grown to the highest level of care in the state of Nevada. We're affiliated with the School of Medicine at UNLV. We have 200 residents in 17 different programs. We're actually at 4,001 employees at UMC. We've got over 1,000 physicians, 1,200 registered nurses. We are 541 beds, and we also have an ambulatory division that has primary care and quick cares throughout our community. Those became an important role too when the number of injuries and that happened, and how people find health care now is on their phones, so they don't always know where the level 1 trauma center is, but urgent care has played an important role that night. UMC is home to a lot of first and onlys in the state. We're the only level 1 trauma center, the only burn and transplant center. We have the most sophisticated technology in the state, and we're also the only accredited children's hospital as well. And we did have some individuals that were under 18, so we had two, one 17-year-old and one 16-year-old at the concert. So our emergency department did see some patients there from the children's emergency. Just a little bit about our trauma center. We pull from about a 10,000 square mile radius of Utah, Arizona, and Southern California. It is unique because it is the only freestanding trauma center west of the Mississippi. So our trauma center is not co-located near the emergency department. It's its own dedicated building in itself. In 2017, we saw about 12,000 patients. We are the hospital for the president, the vice president when they are in town, so we have Secret Service in the facility very frequently. Our trauma center has 11 beds, 18 TICU beds within it, and then 3 surgical suites that have OR capability. Our patient population is about 80% male, 20% female. I'll let you come to your own conclusions on that. Typically, males don't always make the right decisions or the best decisions, so, but we tracked all those stats. We have a 97% survival rate for patients that come in our trauma center, and some of those patients had a less than 1% chance of surviving. Okay, the night of 1 October, so we're going to tell our story, and really this is University Medical Center's story, but every hospital, every urgent care did a great job that night. Even though we're the level 1 and we get a lot of news and press related to that, I'll tell you every hospital was a trauma center that night. So we're going to go through our story. Just a little bit about the timeline. The gunman occupies the 32nd floor on the Mandalay Bay on September 25th. So he was there a few days prior. He's known in Las Vegas. He's he had researched another spot months prior to on the other end of the strip and on the Fremont area in the Ogden Hotel. And during that time, he proceeded to bring over 20 weapons up to his room, all modified AR-15, AK-47s with high-capacity rounds. On the night of October 1st, about 9:40, on the Route 91 Harvest Festival grounds, which is about 300 yards away, Jason Aldean takes the stage as the final act. About 9:59, there was a security officer that was on that floor and had an interaction with the gunman. The gunman shot around 200 bullets through his door and through his room. That security officer was injured. He is actually doing well now. He's back on the job at the MGM. So, and then from there, the gunman proceeded to knock out that 32nd story window and fire around 1,100 rounds in a 10-minute period. The fairgrounds are about 300 yards across the Las Vegas Boulevard of the Strip, and UMC gets its first victims around 10:25. I was personally notified, had just laid down for bed, thought I got 8 hours of sleep, and my phone, as hospitals executives go off early in the morning, typically related to surgery department, and but realized it was a very good friend who is also a CEO of another hospital, and he was at the concert. He had called me, and first thing out of his mouth was, are you guys busy? I said, what are you talking about? He goes, well, he was one that typically leaves concerts early, so he left about 5 minutes before the event happened, and he goes, I hear shots behind me, and I'm at a concert, so I'm leaving, but just want to let you know that you guys are going to get busy. I said, first of all, are you okay? You're good, and then I proceeded to hang up on him, jumped in my wife's 2006 Honda Pilot because she was blocking my car. I don't tell how fast I was going down the 95 or the Summerlin Parkway, but 95, 100 miles, just trying to get to the hospital because I knew it was going to be bad. So got there a little bit right before our first victims arrived. Just in proximity where we're at, as you can see, the Mandalay Bay is at the south side of the Strip. Across the street, diagonal, is the Route 91 Festival Fairgrounds. And then we're up the I-15 corridor, which is kind of our main road going through Las Vegas. About 6 miles, but it takes about 23 minutes to navigate the traffic. This did become complicated navigating because Metro did lock down many of the roads, so not only staff getting to facilities, but also just traffic. The entire city was shut down. Airport shut down. The campus in around the hospital, we're about a block away from the Metro headquarters, so there were already like 3 barriers of Metro officers to be able to get into the facility because you talked about confusion and the fog of war. When I got on the scene, there was rumors or thought that there was about 13 shooters throughout the city in many hotels, even that there was a thought there was a shooter in our medical district as well. Those were all disproved, but it does tell you how quickly things can happen. And so many people had locked themselves. Many hotels went into lockdown. Hopefully this video will work, but this is a just a video clip of. Oh, let's see, maybe. Am I doing that right? Okay. But this is just kind of some video footage from the scene, a patient's story as well, just to show you kind of the chaos that was going on at the event.
I'm going to pull up my mail.
Okay. Out of the 22,000 concert goers, many were from California, as you know, Arizona. We have patients from West Virginia, Utah as well. So more than half of the population that was there were from out of town. Let's see. There we go. Thank you. You're welcome.
Fear and panic were everywhere. Victims piling into this taxi. Among those pulled to safety, 24-year-old Kristen Babbitt.
Out of everyone who was running away and screaming, there were a lot of people going toward it to help.
Tonight, Babbitt is recovering. She's still wearing her concert wristband.
I'm fortunate I didn't pass away, but I'm also unfortunate that I'm now stuck with this bullet wound in my back for the rest of my life.
Go, 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 go. An urban battlefield no one will ever forget.
During the gunfire from this hotel room, police say many of their officers were wearing body cameras, adding much of the video is still being reviewed. Some is too graphic to show. It is a real-life account of the terror that rained down on so many. Lester?
So terrifying just to watch it. I can't imagine living through it. Miguel Almaguer, thank you.
So a little bit about our particular response at University Medical Center. So it's always kind of tough for me to watch that, but let me go through kind of our lessons learned. We received 104 patients that evening. More than 20 surgeries were performed within 24 hours. 12 of those patients were very serious and critical condition. Throughout the night, I had mentioned that many patients just were self-directed or self-transported. So throughout the night, we received 21 transfers to our hospital. We were fortunate to be able to treat and release 44 patients within 24 hours. 60 of those patients were admitted. Very proud that we did not run out of blood or supplies, and I'll talk about why that was. And then no one who arrived alive died at our hospital. We did have 3 fatalities en route to the hospital. Unfortunately, did not make it to us in time, but those are kind of our numbers. So initially, our notification to the hospital was our on-duty administrator and our emergency department were notified that there was an active shooter on the strip. We initially were notified that we were only going to get 5 to 10 patients. So we called our backup surgeon and anesthesia at that time. Soon after, that report got updated to now to be about 50 to 100 patients, and that's what we did see. We quickly activated our disaster plan, our incident command, and then as you can see, this is outside of our trauma center. You can see the team preparing for those patients to arrive, our public safety, our nurses, our patient transport team. We're ready to receive patients. Interesting, the first patient did not come by EMS. It dawned on me about a day and a half that we did have video of the front, and I was sitting in my office, and I asked that Paulette how the first patient arrived. It was actually a young lady carried in by 2 gentlemen in a pickup truck. So that was an interesting way, because usually in our trauma center we know patients are coming and we can prepare for those patients. Within that span of just 5 minutes, we had 40 patients arrive at UMC. Again, half of them were self-transported. People came in by Uber, trucks, cars. Interesting story. One of our survivors, that's actually one of our employees that was at the concert, jumped in a car, and it was just happened to be an elderly couple driving by the strip, and he thought they were an Uber drivers, and we've got some really good video of where we reunited the family. We do a trauma survivors luncheon every year where we bring back our trauma survivors and the caregivers and the providers, because often they forget who took care of them or never have a chance to. So Caesar Palace actually hosts that for us, so it was a very special trauma survivors luncheon. We had a Metro police officer's car borrowed, I won't say stolen, for a little while. They did recover it, but patients were trying to get to the hospital any way they could possibly come. So we quickly set up our triage area, and was very effective. Again, we've got a number of patients there. Just a little bit about our campus. So we're on about 27 acres. Charleston Boulevard is kind of the main road that leads to the I-15. So you can see we have actually 3 emergency departments. We have our adult emergency department, our pediatric emergency department, and then our trauma center, which is kind of up there on the north, the adult emergency department, and then our operating rooms. We had 26 operating rooms, which became extremely important that evening. Here's just a picture of the team that set up the triage area. That's the corridor going from the trauma center to the main hospital. Our patient transport team did a great job of just finding every gurney possible and lining those up and getting the supplies out that we would need. Another important part of, this was important. We were already full that evening. Our 11 beds already had 9 patients in them. In our trauma resuscitation unit, our TICU was full as well. So we were already kind of busting at the seams before this event happened. So the team quickly moved patients around, adjusted, and moved patients to our trauma PACU. We have a PACU in our trauma center. And then also we were able to move some patients over to our surgery center, which helped greatly, because that really became our 4th emergency department that evening, our ORs and our PACUs. Just a little bit about our emergency department. We're 59 beds. We are, as I mentioned, a teaching institution, so we have residents. And then our main operating rooms, we have, actually it's 26 there, but we've got other procedural suites that took care of those patients that evening. A little bit about our trauma center, 11 beds, PACU beds, and then our ambulatory surgery center and our PACU has 46 beds. We were quickly able to accommodate the surgeries. At one point we had 8 operating rooms all working at one time, and we were able to treat those patients. We did 20 surgeries within the first 24 hours, taking care of the most critically injured. We had a lot of resources. I think the timing of this event at night, kind of late evening, but around 10 p.m., I think would have been a different story if it was 2 or 3 in the morning. People were still up. They had the TVs on, social media, very quickly. So when the first patients arrived, we had 2 attending trauma surgeons, and then our surgery and orthopedic emergency residents were there. Within 30 minutes, we had 4 attending trauma surgeons. We do have a fellowship program, and then our residents, and then we continue to staff up from there. And fortunately, we did have these resources at the hospital. By 2 hours, we had 8 attending trauma surgeons, 4 fellows, and then all the residents that were there as well. Throughout that night, it gets very tempting to call in all of your resources, right? You want all hands on deck. But we were very prudent in making sure that we knew this was going to be a marathon, that it was going to take, with the amount of patients not only at our hospital, but also knowing that we were going to probably get more transfers at UMC through our community partners. So, which quite honestly became some tense moments. We had some staff and doctors that were very upset that they weren't called in. So we had to have some crucial conversations about, we need you to really take over and relieve the team the next day. Our internal medicine and family medicine programs, were really great. They took patients that they normally would have not taken and decompressed both the emergency department and the trauma center. And then we were able to transfer 12 ICU level patients throughout the hospital that normally would be in our ICUs, but we were able to staff up and take care of those patients. Some of the key staffing advantages that we did have those dozen trauma surgeons. We have a wide array of specialties at the hospital. We have probably about 17 different specialties sitting by at the hospital right now, ready to take care of trauma patients. Our SMART program, so this taller gentleman with the glasses on the left, he is actually an Air Force surgeon. So we have Nellis Air Force Base about 10 miles away from us. We have a relationship with them. It's called the SMART program, Sustained Medical Air Readiness Training, Air Force Readiness Training. And so we have about 60 embedded nurses, respiratory techs, surgery techs, x-ray techs, trauma surgeons that work in our hospital every day. They take shifts, pull shifts, because they're not able to get the training that they would need at the Air Force Hospital, because it's mostly 19, 20-year-old kids that are relatively healthy. So they are able to see the penetrating trauma, the blunt trauma, the complex care that they would see in the forward operating lines. So very important relationship. We're only one of 3 hospitals in the nation that have that program, but I can tell you the Air Force medics did a great job standing shoulder to shoulder with our team, and they actually that team won an Air Force award just recently by the Secretary of the Air Force. So extremely proud of them. Our experienced techs and nurses, we've got a great team. Unsung heroes, really the anesthesiologists, they never get enough credit, but they were able to pull that team together to do those 20 surgeries in the middle of the night, and so they did a great job. And then you can see we also had our healthcare administrators to help with the logistics, the coordination, working with the Fusion Center, and I'll talk a little bit about the Fusion Center. That was kind of the incident command for the community. All did a really great job. I'm going to go through some of the lessons learned. Specifically, we'll talk about disaster training and how important it is to drill and drill often. The triage area, handling surge capacities, communications, kind of the recovery piece is very important. Managing your supplies, making sure you have enough supplies, prioritizing your needs, and then with these type of events, and you've got a lot of media attention, I'm sure, from your events here, is how to manage the media related to that. Oh, you know what? I think we're on the other presentation, so I don't think we get there. If we can flip back, we'll come back to Stop the Bleed. Do you do Stop the Bleed in the community yet? Know about it? I see, yes. Okay, good. And I'll talk a little bit about Stop the Bleed. Sorry about that.
Is that the right one?
I think that's the one you had up. Yes, that's perfect.
Yep. Okay.
Urgent cares. We do have urgent cares. Urgent cares in and around the strip were overwhelmed that were open, so it's important to engage your urgent cares on these type of situations, and that they know your plans, your disaster plans on how to transfer patients as well. But again, patients just found the closest source of medical care. We did that. Incident command. So this is our incident command. We activated it very early on in the process for a variety of reasons, to be able to manage communication. As I mentioned, the Fusion Center, if you remember, about a year ago, our sheriff, Joe Lombardo, was kind of the incident commander there. Did a great job, but we did have representation to kind of manage the numbers, because there was a lot of interest on number of patients injured, what type of injuries, helping reunite families. So making sure that you have a presence, a healthcare presence in that Fusion Center or incident command. The Hipaa rules, I learned a lot about Hipaa. Obviously, we're all trying to protect Hipaa. patients and their information. Those rules do get relaxed during disasters, so make sure you're aware your privacy officer is on board, because reuniting families as one patient may be on one side of the town and another friend or family, so being able to know those privacy rules. Again, we had our incident command center set up for about 8 days, really because if you would have walked in our hospital medically, clinically on day in, day and a half in, you would have never known that an event like this would have happened. Every patient was where they needed to be, families reunited, all the surgeries taken care of, but what ended up happening is just everything else around this event, outside the hospital, within the community support, and just managing that. So we kept this incident command operational, really more for inbound phone calls and resources. Some of our key challenges were identifying victims. Many patients dropped their cell phones, dropped their purses. So if they weren't able to communicate or talk, reuniting families was very difficult. Managing the flow of information. Again, most of the patients went through about 7 hospitals, so communicating with other hospitals, reuniting. So in fact, our call volume was just incredible. Our PBX was overwhelmed. We had to set up another phone line for calls. I was telling Charlotte last night that we got overwhelmed. The Vice President of the United States had called me, and I was out on the front of the hospital just talking to some community supporters, but he couldn't even get through and patch it through me, so I said, really? You guys couldn't connect them to my cell phone? So he and I are still trying to connect, but you will get overwhelmed with phone calls in the community and just people trying to get information. Again, I think we never ran out of supplies for a variety of reasons, and I'll talk about our preparation prior to this event. Many of our team members came in without even having to be called. I would say about 250 just came in on their own, from EVS to food nutrition to nursing to radiology. They just came in and said, how can we help? So it was really powerful. Just people showed up, so we had lots of help. And then you always get in these type of events, whether it's hurricane, natural disaster, people that are in the community. So we had a few radiologists, lots of nurses that were at the concert that wanted to come in and help. So we put them to work. So we emergency credentialed some staff, but to be able to help, because we just didn't want to turn that generosity away. So just be prepared for your emergency credentialing process. We did, in the Incident Command Center, we had, I want to say, 56 surgeries scheduled for the next day, going into Monday. And because we implemented the Incident Command Center, we quickly realized that, hey, we're going to have a problem. Patients showing up, first of all, not being able to get into the hospital, because it was still very difficult to navigate and get close to University Medical Center. But we made a decision, so we put a team just to call patients in the middle of the night, throughout the night, to let them know that we were going to reschedule them, but now is not a good time, and everybody understood. So important role of also just making sure everybody has a role, but also you got to put people outside of their current roles. So our medical staff director, she really ran our family reunification areas, our HR department. I had really a village that kind of established itself, a community village across the street at our HR IT department. So I asked our HR folks to really manage that, because every day we had thousands of people showing up, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then really no complaints. Never had a complaint from anyone. Everybody just came together as a community. Again, reuniting folks, just so identifying where you're going to put people, how are you going to reunite them. We had people running around taking pictures of our patients to be able to say, is this who you're looking for? Is this your sister? Is this your brother? Is this your boyfriend, girlfriend? So we were able to reunite folks. We did set up our cafeteria. We have a very large cafeteria as kind of our designation for patients that were discharged, that wanted more information, that needed food or other items because of maybe their clothes had been stained with blood or other things, so we had a lot of comfort items provided to them. Not sure who talked about pastoral care and social services. Extremely important, and I met Tony walking in. He helped me get to this building. So, but we don't have our own pastoral department. We rely on the community, but our chaplain showed up, our pastor showed up, did a great job. We have a trauma intervention program that helped with some of the, but these are extremely important. Lean on heavily, not only for your patients, but for the staff, for your first responders, and they did a great job for us. Talked about reunification. Oh, it was difficult. We did have to, as we discharged those 40 patients that I mentioned, getting them back to their hotels or reunited, and we were still locked down. It was difficult to get to our hospital. I have a hospital right next to us as well. It was in Metro is just beyond that. So we had to have a reunification point, and it was actually, we designated the Walmart up Charleston. We had all of our vans, the church vans. That was one thing that they asked, we need vans to be able to get people off our campus back to their hotels. So we ran shuttles throughout the night and the morning to be able to get patients back to their hotels and their loved ones. Key advantages, and on July 26, much like this event, we had Orlando Regional Medical Center come and talk to us. Dr. Gary Parrish, who's the chief emergency physician for Orlando Regional Medical Center, which is a level 1 trauma center. Interesting enough, that's where I started my career as a ER registration representative, and he was there when I was there. So, but they came out and just how to be prepared, and what was supposed to be about an hour and a half conversation was about 3.5, 4 hours. It prompted me to think a lot about, I had our CNO sitting next to me, and I said, how much blood do we have on hand? Do we have enough? Do we have enough chest tubes? So we started ramping up our supplies. And it really was readiness at the top of mind post this event. So that night as well, about 2 in the morning, I get a phone call from a gentleman named David Strong, and he is the CEO of Orlando Regional Medical Center, and I just know his name because I still follow the hospital that gave me my first start. But he called me and said, Mason, this is David Strong. And I said, oh, yes, sir, Mr. Strong. And he said, knock that off. I'm going to get you through this. He said, this is what you're going to expect. And about every hour he would call me and said, this is what's going to happen now with the community, with media, what's going to happen with your staff. So he and I have a very good bond. We text back and forth every once in a while. But reason why that hospital is important is prior to our event, that was the largest mass shooting at the Pulse nightclub shooting in Orlando, which is about 3 blocks away. This hospital is about 3 blocks away from the Pulse nightclub shooting. So again, that was very helpful to our team. Some of the key advantages, again, we had day and trauma shift physicians still there. Our strong partnership with our payers and our organizations, we were able to discharge about 30 patients to subacute or LTAC facilities. They called us and said, what can we do to help? I said, I need capacity. I need to move our patients. So the normal authorizations and all those UR stuff kind of went out the window, and they took a lot of patients for us. And that helped us create the capacity to be able to treat this many patients. Media, very important. Because of the event happening around 10 p.m., media was there within hours, both local, state, national news. At the time, I remember Matt Lauer and Savannah Guthrie, because they were ramping up. They wanted to go live. So we have a very good media relations department that did a great job. We probably had a few thousand reporters outside, but we made sure that our physicians were able to give updates. Media did a great job. They were very respectful, but you need to have a spot for them. You need to keep them fed and keep them, water going, and keep them quarantined to a certain area. You can relate to that? What's that? Okay, normally the president did come and visit us. Normally you have a few weeks to prepare for a presidential visit. We had maybe about 48 hours, 16 waking hours to really deal with this. We put our team. We've got a very good public safety department. Lots of former retired police officers. They really did a great job managing the president's visit. But that adds a layer of complexity. You know, you're trying to treat patients, you're trying to care for the loved ones and the families, but you will have this peripheral visits that will come in. He was supposed to stay for about an hour. He was supposed to go to the police department first. En route, he wanted to come to the hospital and visit patients. He stayed for 2 hours, visited every patient. But it is challenging when you have hundreds of Secret Service and they're on your roof and throughout the hospital. I did get to see the football. It's not that glamorous. It's an old leather satchel. So, but he did a great job. Melania was very sweet to the patients. Very touching moment. And I think the gentleman was from California. It was caught on video where he actually stood up out of his bed, was shot in the leg when the president walked in his room, and he got up for the president. So that was a very powerful moment. So got to see that. But that does add a layer of complexity. Mayor, I know you're here, so welcome. That night, probably about 30 minutes into it, our mayor of Las Vegas, Carolyn Goodman, I don't know if you know her or not, but she came to the hospital and said, "What do you need?" And I said, "Just stick next to me, and we'll get through this together." So she spent probably about 12 hours on her feet with me. We checked in on the hospital next door. We were able to decompress them a little bit as well, but we probably had about 30 elected officials come in, and normally we like to have those protocols, but sometimes they don't always happen because of all the event going on and patient care, but they were great. They just wanted to come out and support, but be prepared for those type of visit from your elected officials. That's our Representative Dina Titus there in that picture, just thanking the hospital for its care. Celebrity visits. So very shortly after, many of the country music singers did want to come back and just visit their fans. I could tell you, when I was in the trauma center in the emergency department, it was just very eerily quiet, and everybody was more concerned about everybody else. And in fact, I saw where somebody was offered some pain medication, and the patient said, "You know what, I'd much rather go to somebody else." But great fans, great support. So that's Jason Aldean on the right. He came back and visited with every patient that was in the hospital. Actually did a small private concert. We were able to wheel some patients over into an auditorium where he just did a one-on-one and talks and discussions. It's Dirk Spintley in the bottom left, right? And then Nick Carter from New Kids is up there on the left. But they came around and thanked all of the staff and visited with the patients, which was really nice. But a lot of that happened after hours on the weekend. So again, when I talked about things just continuing to ramp up, and this is maybe about 3 or 4 days into it. So this is what took me by surprise, and what I didn't prepare for was the overwhelming community support. As I mentioned, across the street we designated our parking lot by our HR and IT. We kind of cordoned it off to be able to receive supplies. Thousands of people were showing up every day to give blood. When people have nothing else to give, and they would come up literally say, "This is the only thing I can give, please take it." So we were able to accommodate those donations of blood. Walmart, Coca-Cola were pulling up in semis, dropping off. You know, I remember standing on the corner and he goes, "Where do you want it?" I said, "What is in there?" I mean, it's just, we probably had about 25 tons of stuff dropped off, some perishable, some non-perishable. But I told my team, although we were okay in the hospital, and that I did not want anything to go to waste. So when you got families and moms bringing their kids by, we made sure that that food got to the staff, food got to the volunteers. These guys, somebody took this picture, and I was talking to the base commander shortly after. I said, "Hey, thanks for sending your guys out." And he goes, "Well, they technically weren't supposed to be there, but they just left and came down to the hospital." So, but these are some Air Force guys stocking stuff, but we probably had 20 tons of stuff dropped off at the hospital. I mean, we had rooms full of stuff through Las Vegas, throughout the country. But again, we quickly worked with our community resources to say, where can we best find to put water, food, comfort items, where can we best put that in our community? So again, this took me off guard. I was not prepared for this, and nor was the hospital, but we quickly adjusted and were able to. Now we have designated areas and what we're going to do should anything else happen again. Here's those lines. That's that village that I called. We collected over 1,000 units of blood over the week. Volunteers, the Golden Knights came out, the Raiders, our foundation. I know that there's the president of the foundation here today from Adventist. We did not know what to do with money when it came in. One of our commissioners did a GoFundMe page, but there's a lot of complexity around that. So the donations that come into our hospital, and over about $1 million was donated to the hospital, go directly to keeping our skills sharp that we displayed that night. So we do a lot of training, but also life-saving equipment. So we're able to, those items are going directly to them. There's a Las Vegas Victims Fund that if somebody wanted to help with bills or recovery, we directed to them. But that took a few days to figure out where do you know, when somebody sends $2 in the mail, where do you best spend that all the way up to $50,000 checks? So that becomes a difficult thing as well. Counseling services. So it was an exhausting week. Many of us were just on adrenaline, very little sleep. I think I had maybe about 2 hours that was interrupted. But you got to make sure you keep checking on your teams, keep checking on the patients, obviously, keep checking on the first responders when they bring patients in. But we relied heavily on our pastoral care, our social workers. We also, with the School of Medicine, they have a behavioral health program that we involved them in our incident command center meetings and updates and asked them to check on folks, and lots of leader rounding to make sure that we were taking care of ourselves. Here's Stop the Bleed. So I saw a couple of hands. So Stop the Bleed is a program where you're able to teach kind of a layman on how to apply a tourniquet, how to apply pressure before the first responders get there. This was, although not officially, this was done at the Route 91. This is a program that we started in Las Vegas through the American College of Surgeons, so we partnered with them. Prior to October 1st, I was tracking the numbers, and we did about 150 trainings, so which was just wasn't enough. And I believe if this training gets out there, it'll actually save more lives than CPR. So if we can get this out in our communities, after October 1st, we've now since trained 5,000 individuals in our community. First was the nightclubs. They reached out to us right after and asked for training. Churches, schools, employers. So we have a team that got to be EMS certified to be able to train it, but we've gone out and trained other hospitals and other community partners to be able to apply a tourniquet, how to use certain things. There was a patient that came in that had a chain around his leg that was used as a tourniquet that somebody took and was trying to stop the bleed on a patient there. So if you want any information about this, we can get that through to you. But again, I firmly believe if we can get everybody trained on this, this will have more of an impact than even CPR. There's some of our, this was prior to October 1st, this was our Red Rock Search and Rescue crew, so we have the Red Rock National Park there that we've got a lot of campers and hikers, but we're training them. And then, although we, probably about day 10, we were able to kind of take a breath, and we were planning kind of just a moment for us to get together as a team, to reunite after taking care of the patients, taking care of all the activity in the community. And this is just a picture of UMC at that event, and we had a lot of food trucks, and the casinos came out and fed the team and took care of them. So, but that's our team there after a long week of caring for our community. So, extremely proud of them. Like I said, while the worst happened in our community, we did get to see the best, and very proud of Team UMC there. So, I think that concludes my presentation. I'm open to any questions you may have. I know that we've got some cards passed around, and open to any conversations. Don't be shy. Anyone? Yes, ma'am. Yeah, that is very difficult because your normal registration process where you're getting everybody's name and their date of birth, that didn't quite happen. So we go through the typical triage process where we've got packets with patient identifiers. There were a lot of people that came in that we gave a quick once over and probably never even made it in the computer system that our docs saw and the nurses saw. So reconciling that was a challenge in our community because of just patients were really everywhere. I believe the number injured is not correct. I mean, because it's over 500, but many people got in their cars and actually headed to California. They just got out of town because of the event going on. So is that number totally accurate? Not completely sure because of just tracking and reconciling. We do have a resiliency center. You probably saw the Family Assistance Center for about 2 weeks afterwards. They had to transition, but we have a resiliency center now that has social workers, counselors, attorney general staff in to help file claims through the accident fund, through other means, through generous donations within the community. So, but that is a challenge to be able to reconcile and get numbers to the Fusion Center, because that was, with the incident command, you want to make sure you've got accurate numbers, both on deaths but also injuries as well. So have a good system. You should test that if you haven't. Yes, Tony.
How do you process those nurses that are out of town and wanted to help? Because I know when I talked to Donita of Sunrise, the director of trauma, they actually turned away some nurses who volunteered, it became a lesson learned for them.
Yeah. So we were able to check so that was one that very quickly, as I remember, the two radiologists that were at the concert from Arizona approached us and wasn't sure how many resources we're able to get into the facility, how many physicians, specialists, anesthesiologists. So we were assessing that as things were happening. But I designated a team member on the medical staff to be able to look up credentials, look up licensure, and again, whether they were direct patient care, they were helping in some form of capacity, moving patients around, helping with supplies, those type of things. So, but we did let people help. We weren't going to turn away help, and just because they wanted to contribute as well and be part of the team. So, but you're able to do that. It was after hours, but we could still go out and copy driver's license and go on the databases to be able to make sure that people are actually credentialed in emergency privileges. So, and during disasters, you typically have in your bylaws the ability to do that, to be able to expedite credentialing in emergency situations. So, yes, sir.
How did you manage the rumors and get at accurate information for purposes of planning?
Yeah, so that was, I mentioned it was a challenge. At one point, 13 shooters, one in and around the hospital. I think having direct communication with the Fusion Center, with the community. Fortunately, our public safety has a very good relationship with Metro, so they've got the channels and frequencies, and our public safety director was pretty much close to me for the first 12 hours. We were able to, but we also sent staff over at the Fusion Center I think we did 3 or 4 shifts over there, 12-hour shifts, so I sent some of my key staff to be able to interact letting the Fusion Center know our capacity, let them know that we have the ability to take more patients, but also our resources, our supplies, and other things. So, and then Metro would come over our incident command as well. They sent a couple of officers to check in on us. But, you know, I think just going to the source and validating some of it, not making decisions on the first thing you hear, you know, that trust but verify is extremely important in situations like this, because you can make some critical errors if you just go off the first thing you hear. So try to validate from the source as much as possible before you make a decision is extremely important.
You said Fusion Center, is that like EMS, local EMS?
So yeah, so the Fusion Center is really our county incident command. It is where, so often it stands up during New Year's Eve, July 4th, any big marathons or any big events. So usually it's pretty quiet. We'll typically have a representative there or on standby to go to the Fusion Center. But it's really all the agencies coming together. So EMS, fire, Metro, public safety, the hospitals. And so that really became the central point, because this was just beyond our hospital. It was really countywide, airport representatives. So I'm not sure what you refer to it in Bakersfield, but I'm sure some of the law enforcement can talk about kind of the incident command for. So, but we felt it was important to be able to get accurate information on both sides, our capacity, but also what was going on in the community, to have representatives at the Fusion Center.
Sounds like you have a good existing relationship with them, and we're able to obviously facilitate communication.
Yeah, we do. You know, our Metro's brothers and sisters in fire, we're a public hospital, so we are. They're very protective of us. They take good care of us, and we take good care of them. So having that relationship, we drill with them often, whether they're having a drill or we always inform them on what's going on at the hospital. So very good response times to our facility. So a question here, yes, ma'am.
How did they secure your facility while it was happening? People coming in and out, chaos, all the work.
Yeah, we do have a lot of entry points throughout the hospital, and we've since refined that and tightened that up since this event, because we did, folks were coming in and media and other in some areas. So we were, our public safety, we do have code lockdowns that we do. And
you can't do a lockdown when people are...
Right. Right, so we really drove our patients to the trauma center with that picture, and then we were able to move patients to the ER via gurney or wheelchair, was really the main route. We did have EMS go into the other side of the adult, but we did, our front doors were locked, but we did drive patients to the trauma center and our adult ED. But it is a challenge because but we did have public safety officers posted at that point. Once we realized how big this was and the city was on a lockdown, we since did that as well. But that's important to be able to manage the flow of who's coming in and out, and keeping a record of that as well. Yes, sir.
What level of coordination did you have with the other local hospitals, and how difficult was that?
Yeah, we, and so we're much like in your community, we all have each other's cell phones. We meet frequently. Sunrise Hospital, which is a level 2 trauma center, actually received more patients than us because of their proximity. They were closer. We ended up getting the most severe patients because of the trauma center. But so I had, in fact, the mayor and I walked over to the other hospital. I said, let's go check on Valley, Mayor. And so they can see that we were engaged and had the ability to help them. We moved about 4 patients from their ER after that visit, one that was very critical. I was in touch with the Sunrise CEO throughout the night and the days to come. So having their number via text or phone number, but also having representatives at the Fusion Center is important too, because your colleagues are there so you can share capacity or resources or supplies. We did loan out some supplies from our facility to be able to help out some of the smaller hospitals that had less critical patients, but so we didn't have to move them. So, But I think that having that network and those meetings is very important. And again, I was mentioning last night that drill your incident command center. We had a power outage the other day in 2 parts of the hospital. You know, I thought it would be back up in 5 to 10 minutes. Well, it was an hour. And then back to your point of the rumors started happening. Well, the blood bank's down, and so we can't do certain things, which wasn't true. So drill it as any hint of any type of disaster or crisis. Just go ahead and activate your incident command center and test it out. Test it out after hours, because often it doesn't happen when we're all there. Do it after hours. Do it on the weekend. Do it when you've got those per diem nurses that may be covering just for the weekend. So, any other questions? Any written questions at all? Well, thank you again. I'll be sticking around if you want to learn anything about any of our programs or how we handled it offline. I'll stick around for a while. But again, thank you for your generosity. It is not by accident I'm here, so thank you for reaching out and praying for us and being part of our family. So again, thank you for your time today. I appreciate it. Thank you.
If there are any other questions or comments, I appreciate everybody coming today. And again, hopefully this is the start of a conversation where we're able, as not only healthcare, but law enforcement, Hall Ambulance, all the different entities here to kind of work together collaboratively. Because as we've all heard, it may not be a shooting, it may be a train derailment, it could be anything, right? Where we're all going to find ourselves. My email keeps coming through here. Where we're all going to find ourselves, that's what it was, sorry. We're all going to find ourselves kind of in the same boat together. We're all going to be working together. So thank you guys so much.